Welcome to the show. I'm so glad that you're here. Today, I'm going to be speaking to my guest, Ronald Holt. He is the author of 1870 to 2020 History Debunked, How Wars and the Scapegoat of Zionism Were Created. Now, Mr. Holt is very humble, so I know that if I ask him these questions during the interview, he's not going to speak about them. But he is a pretty amazing person. He is, well, first of all, he lives in the interior of British Columbia. He swims. He's a cyclist. He's multilingual. He's a former teacher. He's traveled many parts of the world, and he's just really self-educated in many ways, and he's just a joy to speak to us. So I'm very pleased and proud to welcome and have you meet my friend, Mr. World Holt. Welcome, Mr. Holt. Glad that you're here.
Thank you.
So we're speaking about your book, 1870 to 2020 History Debunked, and I know that you're very passionate about it. Let's just begin with a general overall message of what the book is about.
Yeah, I can give you a bit of a synopsis of it. It has 22 chapters, and I'll explain it a little bit. I don't want to start reading the book.
Right.
Well, I remember the last 3 years of World War II in Germany, fortunately not being as severely impacted in the southwest corner than elsewhere. However, the most impressive events were when the message arrived that my father had died in Russia in late 1941, and the senseless bombing of Freiburg in November 1944. Wars are created and don't just happen, and ordinary people prefer living in peace, but there is a group of powerful and evil monsters that see great profit in a war, and it is they who plan it. My research was directed at finding out who these monsters are, and I believe I found them.
Wow.
I also allude to the agenda of the New World Order proponents, the spreading of diseases, and the 2020 US election. Going through the chapters, I try to explain who we are, statute law versus natural law, life in retrospect, fascism versus Zionism, how Kaiser Wilhelm described the events that led to World War I, and how Benjamin Friedman reports what he experienced at Versailles and up to 1962. I write about Zionism's control and agenda and what goes on in Russia and who really controls the West. And then I try to expose the intrigues that led to the Second World War and who really did lit the fuse. I try to explain what the Holocaust is and the cabal that runs the United States. What is patriotism as opposed to warmongering, where patriotism is fired up by propaganda filled with lies and deception. I also point out how Vladimir Putin is a thorn in the eyes of the globalist forces because he favors family life, religion, and the sovereign Russia. I also allude to the influence of the Talmud and the revelations of a prominent Zionist Jew. I also point out how the Rothschild tentacles have reached around the globe and their influence has been the cause of much misery in the world. I included the directives given in the Talmud to Jews on how to deal with the Goyim, non-Jews or cattle, as they call it, and the protocols of the 11 elders of Zion, which were appearing in 1905 in St. Petersburg, but are supposed to be a fake or myth, So, but
Wow.
And how directives written 100 years ago have been carried out to the last detail up to now. All of these, and that's included in the book, both from the Talmud and the protocols.
This is very personal to you. I mean, generally speaking, what would your advice be to someone who's picking this book up and reading it? What would you say? Prepare themselves to understand that they don't know now.
The best thing is I give directives to where to look, and then you do your own research and find out that there's quotes and statements of people that have been, instrumental in informing history, and that all can be researched and on the internet. It's wonderful to be able to do that research without going to a library and going through the piles of books. So that is what I would recommend. Read my book, and then draw your own conclusions. What you want to research to back it up. What I've written, and so that would be the best advice.
Roald, you're talking about this, even though we're talking about 1870 to 2020, this is very much affecting us because you're talking about fuel, you're talking about poverty, the government, all types of corruption, and even the golden rule and how it applies to us today. It penetrates every person today. This is not just about, the wars that have happened way before we were born today, right?
Yeah. I just was on the internet yesterday and found a report on the crime rates in cities over 100,000 in Canada. And it's just astonishing what goes on. And even our next city, which is a little over 100,000, Kelowna in British Columbia, is one of the worst. With the drug abuse and the theft and murders are not that great, but there's other cities that have more murders than we have. But still, there's a lot of crime that goes on that is not necessary. And I have to go and look at history and what happened in Germany during the Weimar Republic, and it's almost a carbon copy of what's going on now here, and especially in the United States. And that is frightening, if it goes on like that. And there's one guy that came and cleaned it all up in a matter of a couple of years. It was all gone. And it was this supposedly the worst war criminal the world has seen. Well, because he happened to lose the war.
There's a lot to learn. There's a lot to learn from history. And if we make the same mistakes in history, it could cause trouble on our current North American ground. And I think that looking at your book is something very important. And unfortunately, we're running out of time. That's how quickly it goes. Roald, I cannot thank you for your insight and for putting this knowledge, because as we lose people who have this wisdom and knowledge and they don't put it into a book like this, it vanishes with them. So thank you for taking time to be able to leave this knowledge with us. Once again, we are speaking with Roald Holt, author of 1870 to 2020 History Debunked, How Wars and the Scapegoat for Zionism Were Created. I want to encourage you to not just purchase this book. You have all the information right on the screen, but to also please give this very fine man a rating on his book, an honest rating, because it really helps the author very, very much. And thank you so much.
I just want to quote Edmund Burke, what he said: if good people do nothing, evil will reign, sort of like
Absolutely.
that. So we have to do good and not allow evil to persist.
It's a wonderful note to end on. Thank you, Roald.